are they remaining non-violent?
I mean, the protests have largely been non-violent, right? I mean, the dramatic scenes you see are the masked federal agents that are descending on communities, sometimes 20, 30 agents at once, seeking to arrest a single individual. Difficult to identify who these agents are because they are sort of clandestinely operating with masks on their face, the entire face is covered. And so that is the concern, that public safety is being undercut by the federal government. And so where we move from here is very important. But remember this, Stella, these are scenes that are now happening in Minneapolis, but they've also been scenes that we've seen in Los Angeles. We've seen scenes like this in New York. We've seen like scenes like this across the country in different jurisdictions where ICE operations have been taking place. And so, these are not new images. What has happened in Minnesota is that 2 U.S. citizens have been shot and killed by ICE agents. And that, I think, has really shocked the nation. And this is why there is nationwide concern about how this investigation is going to play out and whether you're going to get a transparent and credible outcome into the killing of Renee Good and the killing of Alex Pretty.
Are we seeing a significant shift in Republican support following statements from senators like Lisa Murkowski calling for an independent investigation into the use of force?
Yeah, Lisa Murkowski is the Republican senator of Alaska. She is one of a number of Republican lawmakers that has come out. And so we are, yes, to answer your question, seeing a shift from Republican lawmakers. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican senator from Louisiana, called it incredibly disturbing and warned that the credibility of ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security was at stake, and further called for a joint state and federal investigation. Essentially what we've been talking for. They want this transparency in this moment, and that might require state authorities working with the federal government here to understand the facts in this investigation. We have seen calls for hearings on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate, he's the minority leader in the Senate, has warned that they will not support appropriation bills that continue to fund ICE if they do not get certain answers in terms of what happened here to Alex Pretty and Renee Good. So we might be heading towards a government shutdown if Democrats hold firm in the Senate and don't vote for these funding bills that essentially fund the operations of ICE around the United States. So yes, you are seeing a more robust response from Republican lawmakers, from lawmakers across the aisle. The question is, to what extent will this administration, the Trump administration, answer the questions that many congressional leaders have today?
Thank you so much, Shwerin.
Thanks for having me.
That was SABC News U.S. correspondent Sharon Bryce Pearce.
Madapiri pazochitika. Madapiri pazochitika.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito yaulere mu zipatala zaboma mu dziko la Zambia azanyanyala ntchito lachisanu sabata yammawa, ndipo Daniel Shabanda kutambasula nkhani.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito mopanda malipiro apamwezi dziko la Zambia akuyembekezera kuyamba kunyanya ntchito. Ichi ndi chifukwa chakuti boma lalephera kuwalemba ntchito monga mmene lidawalonjezera. Channel Africa News yalankhulana ndi mkulu wa bungwe la madotolo la Resident Doctors Association of Zambia, Dr. Paul Chiwe, akugomeza kuti madotolo ambiri amene akugwira ntchito mu zipatala zaboma akugwira ntchito yaulere, ndipo ali ndi chiyembekezo chakuti tsiku lina adzalembedwa ntchito ndi boma.
Zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi Madapiri.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine. Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et votre 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Gold prices made history today, rising up to $5,100 for the first time ever as investors sought a safe haven amid international political tension. Amid this global gold rush, a shift is emerging as players such as India and China are steadily reducing their exposure to United States treasuries while simultaneously increasing gold holdings. For a look at what this means for global economies, we are joined on the line by senior political economist at the Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Peko. Good evening, Dr. Peko.
Good evening, and I'm a senior research fellow. Thank you, Stella, and also good evening to the viewers and to the listeners.
Thank you. What is your assessment of the historic highs that gold prices are experiencing at the moment?
So China has been consistently adding gold to official reserves since 2022. And a lot of the central banks globally, not only China, are also buying gold at record levels. So what this means is that, there are different motivations: sanctions, risks, reserve diversification, long-term credibility. And what this also means is that there could be a gradual managed treasury reduction. So using intermediaries like some European Union countries, because those seem to be buffer nations at the moment. But I think what could also be really difficult would be if there was a sudden massive sell-off of gold reserves by China, which could harm not only China, but there could potentially be knock-on effects on other economies. But that seems to be the motivation at the moment, is that people are hedging their bets because of the volatility, particularly of the US dollar, for reasons that I think are well documented currently.
How significant is the fear of sanctions or asset freezes in driving the diversification strategy for China and India?
So, there are strategic motivations, Stella. I think China's actions are best understood as risk management, if one could put it, rather than warfare. So, I think in terms of sanctions insurance, remember that Russia also has frozen reserves. And this has changed central bank behavior globally. And I think the second part of that is also to then think around the kind of de-dollarization or the divesting, the decentering from the US dollar that's been taking place incrementally and at the margins for quite some time. So, for example, the trade settlements that are taking place in diverse currencies that are slowly replacing the influence of the dollar. And I think that in terms of sanctions, I would hope that the US in particular would want to be a bit cautious about that, because they have to practice what we'd call long-term geopolitical hedging. And I think that the game of dice that they've been playing over the last 12 months has shown that, portfolio rebalancing, tariff wars, and so forth, and other weaponized ways of doing international trade have not borne very well, including for the U.S. economy itself.
From your perspective as a political economist, does this trend signal the beginning of the end of the US dollar's so-called exorbitant privilege as the world's primary reserve currency?
So, I mean, the dollar still stands for about almost 2/3 of global reserves. I mean, about almost 60% even now. It constitutes the majority of trade invoicing. It is at the core of global markets. And I mean, even though one could argue that this could be the end, the beginning of the end, it could also be the end of the beginning. So in terms, there's no real credible alternative, and yet it combines things like opening up of capital markets, increased liquidity, the rule of law. So one could argue that the privilege may be strained, but not necessarily ended. And it might be constrained by fiscal policy. It might be constrained by the huge US dollar reserves that are held by countries like China. It could also be constrained, of course, by the kind of geopolitical and geofinancial positioning that a country like Russia, for example, might be able to maneuver, right? And lastly, to also indicate that, of course, the European Union and several countries within the European Union see themselves, of course, emerging during this time where, you know, the hegemony, the political hegemony of the US has been replaced by a vindictive recklessness over the last 12 months, which has seen rise to the kind of remarks we saw by the Canadian heads of state last week, and indicating that there's several middle, you know, he described these as the middle countries or the middle nations, which might also begin to posture themselves as potential forerunners to give moral, ethical, and political leadership. And I think on a final note to add that one thing that I think we should bear in mind is that not all leadership and not all hegemonic power is necessarily economic. We're seeing, you know, moral leadership, a country like South Africa, for example, and the stand that it has taken against Israel at great geopolitical costs, I might add. So I think that we might see a multipolarity, Stella, of different kinds of, resurgence or, resurgence of different kinds of political and global powers emerging or consolidating their positions. But I would say that privilege for now is strained, but it has not yet ended.
With central banks positioning gold as a key safe haven asset for long-term stability, in what ways does gold function differently from U.S. treasuries as a risk management tool in the current geopolitical climate?
So, I mean, the one thing is that we can think of central bank behavior as a stabilizing force and not a destabilizing one. Also, we think that, you know, central banks are risk managers. They're not geopolitical actors. So their priorities are capital preservation, liquidity under stress, despite the volatility of currencies and currency flows, crisis management and crisis resilience, one might say, and really to remain credible in the long term. So they try very hard to avoid and avert actions that could trigger or to catalyze public concern, public concern and market panic. They would also try very hard not to undermine their own balance sheets. And lastly, they would not want to create self-inflicted, what can I call them, financial instability, right? So, you know, what they would want to do is to reduce concentration risk. They'd want to improve the resilience of their overall, you know, portfolios, and also, you know, do different kinds of scenario planning and future scenario planning. So when we think about gold accumulation as a stabilizer, we should also appreciate, Stella, that gold is often very, very misunderstood. So central banks buy gold because it hasn't really got a counterparty risk and it always performs well. People are always looking for gold, no matter what. It also anchors confidence during uncertainty. So it's not a coincidence that it has been for many decades, for way too long, that the idea of gold being pegged to the dollar US has meant that has inflated and it has given an exaggerated value to the US dollar. And that value really comes from sentiment more than anything substantive in the actual performance and veracity and elasticity of their economy. So gold is a complement to reserves. It's not a replacement. And it signals prudence, and it should not signal confrontation. So gold isn't per se a vote against the dollar US, but it is an insurance against instability.
What are the primary concerns or risks associated with storing gold abroad in an era of heightened geopolitical tensions?
So, I mean, I think some of the things that I've already mentioned. I mean, one of them is basically that the gold prices are less volatile than most other commodities, and that's because gold is just, there's a reason that we talk about, the gold standard. And I think that the whole idea of hello. Should I continue?
Yes. So with speculation about BRICS nations developing a new gold-backed trade unit or settlement architecture, how might such a system challenge or complement the existing Western-dominated financial infrastructure?
Different ways, actually. So if in fact, we have to think around what this means in the context of the global economy, which is far larger than gold supply. The one question is, would this cause deflation and credit contraction? Is it compatible with different kinds of contemporary banking and debt markets?
Okay.
Would it
to produce?
Can I continue, or are we concluding?
You can continue.
Okay. As I was saying, that in terms of the idea of a BRICS gold-linked unit and whether it can really challenge the dollar, so we have to think around this in the context of a unit of account, which is used for trade settlement, and think around something that's gold-linked but not necessarily gold convertible. Which could be used. What is being discussed is whether it can be used between member states, not by the public. So it wouldn't be, you and I trading in gold, for example. And this would not be a common currency. So I think that's another important clarification. And it's not a gold standard per se. But what it could do potentially is to facilitate multilateral and bilateral trade settlement. And this would mean that in the context of our own sometimes quite volatile or vacillating currency values and devalues, we would not be subject to the vagaries of higher returns on higher payment and debt returns, loan returns in conjunction to what we might have borrowed in the first instance. It would also mean lower exposure to US financial sanctions and financial markets, which I think at a time such as this, that insularity, that inoculation is incredibly important. But of course, symbolically, it appeals to many people, many of us politically, as a symbol of autonomy and divesting away from the US. It can't necessarily challenge the dollar in the short term because different BRICS countries differ on capital controls. We differ on inflation histories. We differ on our currency values. We differ on our exchange rate regimes, legal transparency. I mean, many of the same things we've even been struggling with within the SADC, for that matter, within the African Union, and why this dream of Pan-African economic union even has been difficult. Much more now with all of these different countries, 15 plus countries now, I think, and counting, which have wildly different, types of capital controls and fiscal systems. But I think also gold linkage is not enough. We have to also create safe collateral pools. You have to create deeper bond markets, and also reserve currencies that are dependent on financial openness. And unfortunately, many countries, of course, we are hegemonic, right? We are protectionist. We want to know that our own interests are first going to be protected. So dollar dominance doesn't really rest on politics. It rests on markets, which unfortunately have also become political.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peko, for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
That was a senior political economist at the Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Peko.
Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
An infamous illegal gold mining site has been shut in Zambia after a military intervention. Situated in Mafumbwe district, about 800 kilometers from the capital Lusaka, the gold-rich area has been a source of economic and security concern to the country, as over 50,000 Zambians and foreign nationals had infiltrated the area to carry out illegal activities. Details of the military action are reported by our Zambian correspondent Arthur Davis Sikopo.
The directives from the Commander-in-Chief are very straightforward: to exterminate illegal miners.
Those are the exact words of the Zambia Army Commander Geoffrey Ziele, that the Defense Forces were given strict instructions by their Commander-in-Chief, President of the Republic of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, to exterminate illegal miners that would resist evacuating King Konge and surrounding areas where they are doing illegal mining. Initially, King Konge area in Mufumbwe, northwestern region of the country, has been an innocent heavy forest until about April in 2025, when it became a center of gold rush in Zambia, with thousands of people flocking there as the precious minerals would be found less than 1 meter digging in the ground. Women, men, and young people in their thousands all camped in the area trying to make a fortune through illegal gold digging with some simple tools, as the gold lay almost at the surface of the ground. Government got worried that the country was losing economically. It sent state police around mid-2025 to displace the illegal miners, and about 30,000 illegal miners were removed, but they returned, and the number is believed to have been way bigger this time. January 2026, Army Commander Geoffrey Ziele informs Copperbelt Minister that criminal gangs, illegal immigrants, and possession of illegal weapons are now the order of the day in King Konge, in Mufumbwe.
Some individuals were seen carrying weapons whose description leads to some certain type of weapons that is of great concern.
The Zambia Defense Forces, a combination of different military outfits, including the Zambia Army, the Zambia Air Force, and the Zambia National Service, led by the Special Forces or Commandos, were then dispatched last Friday, and by Saturday, 24th January 2025, the military managed to clear up the area of illegal miners. Stakeholders give their accounts on this development. An environmental activist who also runs Care for Nature Zambia, Nsama Musonda Kens, commends the action as it is good for the environment.
Conducting illegal activities comes with a lot of implications such as social, economic, and environmental challenges. For example, when the environment is degraded, how do you hold them accountable? Where do you find the people who are in charge of these operations?
Clarence Muziamba of the Zambian Empowerment Hub for Entrepreneurship and Skills Training condemns military use and calls for logical ways of dealing with entrepreneurs through formalization of sectors they're engaged in.
The military's role is to protect our territorial borders and maintain order, not to harass citizens with guns. Empowerment, not disempowerment. As an empowerment hub zest, our mandate is to see that Zambians are empowered and not disempowered. We call on the government and the military to work together with us to support our SMEs.
Has the gold rush in Mufumbwe completely come to an end? Well, only time would tell. Reporting for Channel Africa in Lusaka, Zambia, I'm Arthur Davis, Scopo.
Countries in southern Africa have started preparing to mitigate against the outbreak of cholera following the recent floods. Malawi is one such country that has begun the rollout of cholera vaccinations. In 2024, the World Health Organization WHO reported over 800,000 cholera cases and over 5,000 deaths across 33 countries, spanning 5 WHO regions, an increase from previous years. Sisi Segalo has more on the story.
Cholera is an illness caused by ingestion of contaminated food or water. It remains a serious health concern, especially during humanitarian crises involving floods or collapse of infrastructure. Recent floods in the southern part of the continent have caused countries to be on the alert for cholera. Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC's Director General, John Garcia, said last week that they are ready to support countries should there be an outbreak.
Flooding means next cholera outbreak. We are ready. From today, we start to activate our Emergency Operations Center and to see how to support our countries. This is also an opportunity for us to say all actions and decisions we made to control cholera in Africa must be implemented now.
Malawi started its vaccination rollout last week to mitigate against a cholera outbreak. The 3-day rollout covered areas like Blantyre. Non-governmental organization working in the health sector in Malawi, the Malawi Health Equity Network, says their major last outbreak was in 2022. However, late last year, they started seeing some cases. Executive Director Jobe Georgie says they are calling on the private sector and development partners to come on board before the cases surge.
When we are talking about the fight against cholera, it requires different stakeholders. Like ourselves as civil society organizations, we have local and international NGOs, and the Ministry of Health, of course, is now the owner of the fight. But we also have development partners. This is the time we need more development partners at the moment, because the cases have not reached serious levels. And we need more interventions, we need more awareness raising, which we think requires a lot of resources. And the development partners must come more in numbers now. Chlorine needs to be distributed where people might have challenges to access quality water. Yeah, so we just wanted to call upon different stakeholders, including the private sector and development partners, to come and support the fight.
Communities are also called on to take preventative measures. Georgie says the disease is underrated, with many people believing it ended 3 or 4 years ago. He shares the message going out to Malawians.
Key to the messages that the Minister of Health has been putting across to the people have been washing hands with the soap regularly, especially after one has visited a toilet or pit latrine, and before one takes food, washing fruits and vegetables thoroughly with clean water, and ensuring people use water from reliable sources. And if we note they should always apply chlorine to the water they are using. Issues of sanitation around the home to ensure everyone has a good waste management and also good sanitation along the streets in the cities. Issues of ensuring people prefer to use hot food, and those who are selling food in our streets must also observe hygienic practices. The other point which also came in is the use of the issue of handshake. You know, in Africa, most people, when they meet, they want to greet each other, they would want to shake hands, and after shaking hands, one must sanitize their hands or wash their hands with soap or just avoid the handshakes.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South African tourism has concluded its participation at the 2026 Vacant Beers travel show in Utrecht, as well as a 7-city roadshow across the Netherlands and Belgium aimed at strengthening market access in North Europe. The engagements brought South African tourism products face-to-face with key travel trade partners, reinforcing the country's position as a diverse and experience-rich destination. Our reporter, Rebogang Mabange, has more.
South African tourism has wrapped up a successful showing in North Europe following its participation at the 2026 Vacante Beers and the completion of the Come Find Your Joy North Europe Roadshow across the Netherlands and Belgium. The multi-city roadshow connected South African tourism businesses, destination management companies and provincial tourism authorities with travel agents, tour operators and online platforms selling South Africa in the region. Explaining the importance of the roadshow in expanding market access, AB Jacobs, South African Tourism's acting hub head for Central Europe and marketing lead for North Europe, says the initiative was designed to bring South African products closer to the travel trade.
The roadshow, and the reason why South African tourism prioritized having a roadshow, then links South African product and businesses with the travel trade in the market, meaning the travel agents, the tour operators, in some cases even online travel agencies, so that the people who sell the destination in the Netherlands and in Belgium have access to product on the ground. And that's one of the core reasons why we run a roadshow straight after Vakansiebeers. It is for market access for our South African product.
Jacobs says the Netherlands and Belgium have consistently remained strong source markets, with travelers showing high levels of repeat visitation to South Africa. This, she says, allows South African tourism to introduce new experiences and encourage travelers to explore different itineraries across the country.
The Netherlands and Belgium can be categorized as mature travelers in terms of the traveling population propensity to travel long haul for leisure purposes. Because of that maturity, the frequency of coming to South Africa is also quite high. We get an average of a 50% repeater rate from both markets who travel to South Africa and visit us, meaning half of the arrivals we get are people who have been to South Africa before. This is important because it means that as a market who's come to South Africa more than once, they are open to various different offerings and various different itineraries.
She adds that the recently concluded roadshow also ensured broader representation of South Africa's tourism offering, including different provinces and experience categories.
And our job as SA Tourism is to ensure that we create the access to the different offerings that the consumers seek in that market. So running a roadshow and prioritizing different categories of product is actually a business need in addition to an opportunity to create extensive access for South African product. In stating that, we are always trying to showcase all of our different provinces. When we showcase product to our different markets, we are always highlighting experience pillars that we know the consumer from those markets want,
South African tourism says initiatives such as the recently concluded Vakante Piers and North Europe Roadshow form part of its broader strategy to grow arrivals from Europe, stimulate demand, and build long-term travel confidence in key international markets. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I'm now joined by Sheila Ndikumana, who will take us through the African Diaries from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. Sheila, how are you?
I am fantastic. A little shaken. I just got some very bad news. However, we're here, we're alive, and we're grateful for life. So what to expect on the show this evening? We kickstart off with looking at trauma. Now, did you know that trauma experienced by one generation can pour into the third and fourth generation? I didn't know that. As
Really?
you can check this in the DNA strands. This grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be prone to anxiety. Depression comes easier to them than most people. You know, they don't know how to navigate life. However, all of this was passed down through the lineage, through blood. And so we're going to be talking about that in the first hour. Then in the second hour of the show, we talk about communal love. And one way to express it, which is learning someone else's language.
I love that.
Right? How many languages do you speak?
I speak, I think, 4.
Come. We're here for that, man. I was trying to learn 35 languages by the time I turned 35. I don't think I'm getting there.
You get there.
35 by 35? No, man. That's too ambitious. No.
I want to get to 10. At least now I'm at 4.
Yeah.
I know maybe in the next 5 years, I'll learn maybe 2.
Okay.
And in the next 5, yeah.
That's so impressive. Okay, you keep on learning, ma'am, and that's what we can expect on African Diaries.
Okay, that's very nice. Looking forward to African Diaries tonight. Thank you so much, Sheila. All the best.
Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Authorities from humanitarian agencies say search and rescue efforts continue across Mozambique following devastating flooding. More than 640,000 people have been affected, with more than half of those in Gaza province. Authorities say the regional capital, Chai, is submerged and fears of hunger and disease are mounting. Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
Local authorities are coordinating with the country's relief agency, the National Disaster Management Institute, to ensure aid reaches those in need. Paula Emerson, head of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Mozambique, says more than 500,000 people have been affected by severe flooding across southern and central Mozambique, particularly in Gaza, Maputo, Sofala provinces, with Gaza province accounting for nearly 2/3 of those affected.
The National Disaster Management Authority, INGD, and partners continue relocating people to safer areas and are conducting search and rescue operations at this point. Currently, there are 51 accommodation centers active nationwide, hosting more than 50,000 people, including around 38,000 in Gaza province. The situation remains fluid and dangerous. Search and rescue continue, but more support, more capacity is needed. Road access is severely impacted, including the risk of flash flooding linked to the rains, but also dam releases in Mozambique and upstream countries. Xai town, near the Limpopo River, has been inundated, prompting the evacuation from this provincial capital to higher ground. Authorities have also issued alerts for downtown Xai-Xai, including warnings of crocodile risks in flooded areas.
The United Nations Children's Fund says children are especially vulnerable, with access to clean water, food and health care uncertain for those people. Guy Taylor, UNICEF Chief of Communication, says the heavy rains had triggered a rapidly escalating emergency, creating a deadly threat for children.
Flooding that we're seeing is not just destroying homes, schools, health centres and roads. It's really turning unsafe water, disease outbreaks and malnutrition into a deadly threat for children. And the fact that Mozambique is now entering into its annual cyclone season creates the risk of a double crisis, with the most vulnerable children impacted most severely. More than 50,000 people have been forced to flee their homes and are now sheltering across 62 temporary centres, many of those very overcrowded, creating its own risk of disease outbreaks. Access to the most basic services, so talking about clean water, healthcare, nutrition, education, is uncertain or unsafe at best in most impacted areas. And in that kind of condition, these kind of conditions, children really face higher risks of disease, of interrupted learning, and of course of protection risks. And that's particularly the case for girls and for adolescents. Of particular concern are waterborne, or is the combination of waterborne diseases and malnutrition, which can often prove lethal. Even before the recent floods here in Mozambique, around 4 out of every 10 children were experiencing chronic malnutrition. And so this renewed disruption to food supplies, to health services, and to care practices threatens to push the most vulnerable children into a dangerous spiral. And that includes the risks, of course, of acute and severe acute malnutrition, which is the deadliest form of malnutrition.
Humanitarian agencies say that the extreme weather has wiped out crops that millions of small-scale farmers rely on to feed themselves, while the waterborne cholera disease is often a threat following the major flooding. Weeks of torrential rains across southern Africa have led to some of the worst flooding the region has seen in years, with parts of Mozambique, Zimbabwe and South Africa all affected. More than 100 people have died across the three countries, but authorities say the death toll is likely to rise. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Thank you for tuning in toward our Stella Longwe, standing in for Tsepiso Makwetla, who will join you tomorrow. Good night.
It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration.